A strong place and wonderful was Isengard, and long it had been beautiful, and there great lords had dwelt, the wardens of Gondor upon the west, and wise men that watched the stars. But Saruman had slowly shaped it to his shifting purposes, and made it better, as he thought, being deceived, for all those arts and subtle devices for which he forsook his former wisdom, and which fondly he imagined were his own, came but from Mordor, so that what he made was not, only a little copy, a child's model or a slave's flattery, of that vast fortress, armory, prison, furnace of great power, Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, which suffered no rival, and laughed at flattery, biding its time, secure in its pride and its immeasurable strength.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. This week we are reading Book 3, Chapter 8, The Road to Isengard. My name is Zach.
And my name's Logan.
We got ourselves an in-betweener this week, Logan.
Yeah, we're on the road with Theoden King and Gandalf, his friend.
It's a shorty. I mean, it's only 16 pages long.
Yeah. 8 pages too many, maybe?
Maybe 16 pages too many.
It's a lot of... Corey Olsen, the great Corey Olsen, often talks about Tolkien, the landscape artist.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of that in here. Tolkien kind of saying what things look like.
There was a lot of saying what things look like in this chapter.
All right, I get it. You're good at describing things, you know?
I mean, there are things in this chapter that we just haven't had, but they're very few. I mean, the full description of Isengard is pretty great.
I like the description of Isengard. I love the stuff with the forest and
the Huorns.
The trees that, came to Helm's Deep and then they get to see a bunch of Ents. It's kind of cool.
It's pretty neat. And,
Theoden and all the riders of Rohan are freaking out, which is pretty exciting. So, it's just sort of a breezy chapter. It's kind of, you're like, all right, we're just sort of, walking along with these guys.
Yeah.
And Gandalf is definitely in the lead. I think that's kind of cool to see too, that, Gandalf is in his glowed up state. He's definitely the leader of the
right.
Whatever caravan. So,
and we get the reunion of the three hunters with the hobbits.
I realized how much I missed hobbits over the last few chapters. And then I flipped forward. I was like, how far are we from book 4? And, it starts with Sam. Book 4 starts with Sam talking. And I was like, oh man, I can't wait to see what those guys are doing.
Oh yeah. We got Smeagol coming up. We got lots of great stuff coming up.
But yeah, Merry and Pippin, it's the tone that they bring is so unique and just just always a breath of fresh air, I think.
I felt in this chapter more than I've really felt since probably book 1, chapter 3, that this is just simultaneously Tolkien at his best and Tolkien at his worst. He desperately needed an editor, but he was so invested in the project that he just couldn't bear to have anything cut.
Yeah.
But this really could have been a couple paragraph coda on the next chapter. And then they went to Isengard, and then we come to, Merry and Pippin. It really could have just been
so
and then
too.
they traveled for 3 days and got to Isengard or whatever. It could have just been a 2-sentence.
Yeah. It's, even with that being said, it's so expertly crafted.
Yeah.
Just the prose, is so
It's beautiful
pleasurable to read. And so I think that it bears, I would hate, what we really want is more from Tolkien,
Well, see, that's the thing is by the time I get to the book, I wish it was another 1,000 pages longer.
Exactly. And so you finish the book and you're like, God, geez, and the unfinished tales and some of those stuff, like that stuff is all great, but it's not the same, I think, level of quality as Lord of the Rings, because he spent so much time on this. This is like the finished thing. And so, yeah, it'd be awesome to have another 1,000 pages. So to be like, well, he really needed an editor. I'm like, well, yeah, he did, but still, it's great that we get what we have. So,
yeah, we can't complain too much.
No.
Do you mind if I read a selection from Tolkien's letters?
Well, I would love if you would do that.
There's 3 selections that I wanted to read from the letters. The first one is a really famous letter that he wrote to a potential publisher after his original publishers, Allen and Unwin, were like, dog, like, we cannot publish this thing. He wanted to publish Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion together.
Right, together, yeah.
And the Silmarillion was not even close to being finished. He was already getting older. And Allen and Unwin were like, hey, we wanted a children's book that was a sequel to The Hobbit.
Yeah,
and you gave us
weird Bible you gave us.
And you gave us the Bible and Lord of the Rings, and you want us to publish them together. It's going to be like an impossible publishing task. And so he refused to edit any of it, and he refused to not publish the Silmarillion with it. And so Allen and Unwin were like, hey, we got to pass. So he starts seeking out a different editor, Milton Waldman of Collins Publishing, which ironically I think became eventually HarperCollins, the publisher of Lord of the Rings in the United States. But he writes like what is essentially a 10,000 word summary of the entire Legendarium, starting with the Silmarillion through the Hobbit into Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, cool.
So it's a great read, and it's a great way to kind of give yourself a bird's eye understanding of where Tolkien was, what he was trying to accomplish. But at the end of this letter, he goes, it is not possible, even at great length, to pot the Lord of the Rings in a paragraph or two, so to summarize it. This is the shortest I can manage. So he just sent like, novella. It was begun in 1936, and every part has been written many times. Hardly a word of its 600,000 or more has been unconsidered, and the placing, size, style, and contribution of the whole of all the features, incidents, and chapters has been laboriously pondered. So he's like, look, there's not a word that I haven't thought about. And so if you come trying to cut or tell me how to spell things, like, don't try to change the spelling of elves or dwarves or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, nothing will be cut, nothing will be lost. He goes, I do not say this in recommendation. It is, I feel, only too likely that I am deluded, lost in a web of vain imaginings of not much value to others, in spite of the fact that a few readers have found it good on the whole. What I intend to say is this. I cannot substantially alter the thing. I have finished it. It is off my mind. The labor has been colossal, and it must stand or fall practically as it is. And so he sends this to this editor, and the editor eventually is like, okay, sorry, can't publish it. Like, there's no way we could possibly make money on this book. And so he has to go back to Allen and Unwin. And the concession that he makes is that, okay, you don't have to publish the Silmarillion. We'll just publish the Lord of the Rings. We'll publish it in 3 volumes, which he didn't want to do. And that's how we ended up with Lord of the Rings in 1954.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that he sort of stuck to his principles, on like what the Lord of the Rings is and the choices that he had made, and that he felt really confident about, his viewpoint on the thing. And I guess the risk was that no one would publish it, right?
And it looked for a long time like that was going to be the case.
Yeah, and then where would we be?
Yeah,
I mean,
I think it at all.
Right, and so I think, he knew that it was quality work, and I think he probably also, I mean, The Hobbit had been a big success, so I think he probably knew or had some, inkling that he could go and get at least Lord of the Rings published.
I don't know that he did. I mean, you see, even in the text, there's this almost like winking nod in the text that nobody's ever going to read this thing. Like,
yeah, that's true.
so
That's
many
true.
characters are like, oh yeah, we're going to write down this book. I wonder if anybody will read it. Because I think he just did that for himself. He's like, oh no, I mean, like, this is 17 years of, you know, like, I mean, he ended up in the hospital for, exhaustion, as they would have called it.
Well, like a anxious, nervous breakdown.
Yeah, like at least once that I could tell from reading the letters and his biography and things. A lot of the biographical stuff kind of glosses over that. It was a gargantuan effort. It was a physical effort. I mean, he typed it by himself, by hand on a manual typewriter twice.
He didn't have He didn't have a typist.
He asked Allen and Unwin to provide a typist, but they couldn't because they were strapped for cash during World War II.
Oh, sure.
And so in order for him to even have the manuscript read, he had to type it himself. And that was an enormous physical effort for a man his age.
I bet he couldn't really type either. I bet he was hunting and
two
pecking.
fingers.
Yeah.
He was pecking out with 2 fingers. And it took him years just to type. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think I'm just consistently awed by how gargantuan the effort was by him working primarily alone. He had some feedback from the Inklings, but he really committed his life without any promise that anybody was ever going to read it.
He didn't even have to type this chapter. I mean, he could have just skipped it.
See, that's the thing. He was just so committed to his principles.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, wow, he really it's so funny
could have done himself a favor.
Yeah, it's just so funny to hear him say, that every word has been considered. And that's obviously the case, even in this chapter where it's like, you're kind of like, all right, I guess, we're along for the ride here with the professor, but it's so beautifully done.
Yeah.
But even as beautiful as it is, it's like, man, you could have taken a day off that day and, just skipped straight forward to the confrontation with Saruman.
Here, can I read another selection from the same letter?
Yeah.
If anybody wants to look up this letter, it's well worth a read. It's letter 131 to Milton Waldman, and you could find it in the collection of the letters of Tolkien. I think this is a theme that plays out in this chapter. It made me think of this letter specifically. Tolkien says, I believe that legends and myths are largely made of truth, and truth in quotation marks. And indeed, present aspects of it can only be received in this mode. And long ago, certain truths and modes of this kind were discovered and must always reappear. Consistently throughout this chapter, Theoden and the Hurim are just gobsmacked by, okay, here are the Ents. It's like, all right, here are these things that we have told our children in song out of a sense of obligation, but we didn't actually believe that they were real. Mm-hmm. And the lessons that they learn from these myths. The second example in this chapter is when he meets the hobbits and he's like, oh my gosh, these fairy stories are coming to life before my very eyes, And Éomer says a very similar thing when he meets Aragorn and he, sees the sword reforged. He's like, legends spring from the grass,
Mm-hmm.
But I think that Tolkien, maybe his contribution to the world is the legitimization of myth and fairy story as an adult occupation, not just something that we do with our kids to entertain them, but something that's actually important, and that there's truth in these stories that can't be told in any other way. And the modern tendency to kind of scoff at fairy stories, especially at that time, was a lost opportunity to experience truth.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think that the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit have spawned, they created room for imaginative possibilities, right?
Yeah.
For authors and artists to, offer views of the world that only exist in that kind of mythic tone or shape that otherwise, modernism and kind of post-Enlightenment thinking doesn't really gesture toward.
Yeah. Or see as important or worthy of our attention.
Yeah, right. And so, but it's it's obviously something people crave. Otherwise, the kind of industries that are built up around it wouldn't be as popular as they are.
And I think Tolkien is largely responsible for that now.
Yeah. I only wish that the kind of genre of fantasy had not been kind of crafted the way it was by some of the publishers, especially in the United States, where they had this like formula of about how to sell fantasy stories that really dominated for 20 or 30 years. And I think we're only kind of coming out of that, but especially now that more women and people of color are writing and finding audiences in fantasy. But I still think, like the shape of Lord of the Rings has always maintained those kind of imaginative possibilities for anybody to say like, well, what if the world was like this, or this is how the world, my experience of the world, I can craft my own myths and worlds to communicate what it's like to be, whatever, a black woman or a native person or, or a queer person or whatever, in a way that, just a simple kind of straightforward literature wouldn't. So I totally agree with you. I think that's a great point.
All right, so my last letter that I want to read is letter 27. This is a letter to Houghton Mifflin, like the American publishers of The Hobbit. They were asking about how to portray the different characters in Lord of the Rings in illustration, like how to make them look. Yeah, this is a letter that I think might really change your life. I want you to listen to this really carefully, Logan. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
There is in the text no mention of him acquiring boots. This is Bilbo. There should be! Exclamation point. Exclamation point. It has dropped out somehow or other in the various revisions. The bootings occurred at Rivendell. Bootings with an S occurred at Rivendell, and he was again bootless after leaving Rivendell on the way home. But since leathery soles and well-brushed furry feet are a feature of essential hobbitness, he ought really to appear unbooted, except in special illustrations of episodes. Would you like to apologize to me publicly on this pod for your derision and your mean-spirited joking about the bootlessness of hobbits and how dumb I was for suggesting that they might be wearing boots in the snow going through the mountains?
I guess, J.R.R. Tolkien should have been a little more careful about the writing of this work, because it just doesn't appear in the text, and so
I would like to draw your attention to the introduction to Lord of the Rings, which perhaps you, among other people, skipped in your haste to arrive at chapter 1.
I would never do that.
Where in the description concerning hobbits, ever heard of it? He describes hobbits as usually barefooted, though sometimes wearing heavy boots in mud or other conditions. Once again, I yield the mic to you to apologize to me.
I guess, if we want to raise a secondary canon to the level of, the primary text. Then
secondary canon. Listen to your postmodern drivel.
Then we can say, then yes, I do. In that case, I suppose I do have to apologize to you. I'm sorry for making fun of you for demanding that the hobbits wear boots.
I hope it never happens again. I forgive you fully and completely, and I love you. All right.
Thank you. I love you too. Let's not fight.
Hate when we quarrel.
Makes my heart hurt.
Before we jump into the text, I would like to give a special shout out to our possibly youngest listener.
Definitely our smartest listener.
Certainly our most intelligent listener.
Absolutely.
Zadie, age 8, who has a question for you and me. I'd like to hear your opinion on this.
Yeah.
Zadie says, there's a lot of focus on what they eat and drink in the story, but there's not a lot of mention of when, how, or how frequently they pee or poop.
Yeah. She's right. She's so right.
Do you think they pee and poop?
I mean, they have to pee and poop, right?
Oh, absolutely.
especially all that walking, it really kind of gets your
Body working.
digestive tract really working. So seems like they're probably stopping to go potty quite a bit.
Yeah, I imagine, just every once in a while, someone would just be like, "Hey, fellas, 1 minute."
Just a second. Or Gandalf says, "All right, everybody take a bathroom break before we go because we don't want to stop, We don't want to stop on the road."
Pippin, I'm looking at you. All right, I know you have to go.
There's no Buc-ee's to stop at between here and the gates of Moria, and so I need you to go now before we leave. Gandalf, I don't want to go.
But Gandalf, I went earlier.
I went 10 minutes ago. Like, I don't care.
Went right after second breakfast.
Go again.
Just try.
I think that that question shows a pretty deep engagement with the text.
100%.
She's like, what the heck is going on? They're not stopping to go to the bathroom.
I mean, for all of Tolkien's logistics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was thinking last night.
He's worried about the phase of the moon, and he's worried about like elf propagation math, but he's not going to worry about the logistics of bathroom breaks.
I know, silly.
I think, like on a serious note, Zadie, I think that Tolkien was a British man in the 20th century, and there were certain things that were not talked about in polite company. And so I think that he would probably be thinking about these things, but not speaking about these things. And I think we have like a little more of an evolved understanding of like just bodily functions now. Like everybody poops, everybody pees, but back in the day, it was kind of considered rude to talk about those things. But I'm glad we've moved on from that. Impolite.
But I do sort of wonder, when he was with the Inklings and they were 3 or 4 pints in, did they joke around about, like when does Frodo poop?
Well, there's yet another letter that I would like to reference. I don't have the text in front of me.
Beautiful.
But C.S. Lewis joked that of all of the great pleasures of being alive, the greatest pleasure was being at the pub with your friends, drinking beer, and then arriving at home to relieve yourself.
That's so true. That is so true. I love it.
All right. Well, Zadie, thank you for listening. Thank you for your very thoughtful question. And thanks for being so smart and coming up with a good one for us.
Absolutely.
If you listener have any questions, you can always email them to us at info@waywardwizards.com, and we will consider them with at least the amount of depth that we applied to this question about peeing and pooping.
That's right.
Well, that's a great segue getting into the text. You want to jump right in?
Let's jump it.
So we kind of pick up at the reunion of all the different parties at Helm's Deep after the battle has already been won. So you can imagine it's the morning time. And it says, "There came Gamling the Old and Éomer, son of Éamund, and beside them walked Gimli the dwarf. He had no helm, and about his head was a linen band stained with blood, but his voice was loud and strong. 42, Master Legolas, he cried. Alas, my axe is notched. The 42nd had an iron collar on his neck. How is it with you?" And Legolas says, "You passed my score by 1. I have 41. Do you think that's true?"
No, I think Legolas is just being nice to him.
I think Legolas sniped a few more people than he's letting on here.
I like the implication that Gimli was cutting off orcs' heads, and that's why the iron collar, notched his axe.
Absolutely. A couple chapters ago, he says, "Now that Gandalf's head is sacred, let us find one that is right to cleave." He's ready to chop off some more orc heads. And they're basically like, "Gandalf, we're so glad that you came." And he's like, "Dude, I told you I was going to come." And he's like, yeah, but you didn't say when or where or in what manner or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I think in the movie he says, "Look toward the dawn" or something like that, doesn't he?
He gives an exact date and time to look for him. Yeah. It's pretty much opposite to how it happens here.
Yeah. Very different.
They're basically like, "Hey, your wizardry is unmatched, bro. You're super wizard. You're the number 1 wizard." And he goes, "Your own valor has done more, and the stout legs of the Westfold men marching through the night." So he's like, "This isn't really wizardry. I just got people where they needed to be."
He just has a fast horse, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of like that he didn't do it through some kind of magic or something. He just did it through effort. And I mean, the horse is magical, I guess, in a way, but
Yeah. Super horse.
it was more about planning and communication than it was about any kind of mystical powers.
And he kind of lays out here like what he did, like over the course of the chapter. It's kind of unveiled, but
Yeah.
he found out that people were scattered after the battles at the River Isen where Theodred was killed.
Uh-huh.
Erkenbrand was the big one, but lots of other people were scattered all around. And so all he's really doing is just riding from place to place, kind of like collectively rallying these retreating troops.
Right.
Like it wasn't a rout. Like it wasn't like everybody died, like the way that Theoden, I think, feared. But he gives them different tasks. Like he sends a lot of the retreating men from the Westfold to Helm's Deep, and that's who we see, with him at the dawn with Erkenbrand himself. Then he sends a lot of people, and this was a question I had last chapter, which is like, why exactly don't the orcs just march straight to Edoras? I gave the answer that you didn't want to have an army behind you, which is what would happen if they passed Helm's Deep. And I think that that's true, but Gandalf kind of prepared for that contingency. He's like, I didn't want the wolves and the orcs to just fly right past Helm's Deep and then attack Edoras while it was undefended. And so he sent men to defend Edoras. And then he gives men the task of burying the dead. And so he did a lot in that short time. He was basically doing 3 separate things all at once. It's pretty cool.
The part where he has a kind of company of men build, like a
What do they
funeral,
call it, a cairn or something?
Yeah, like a funeral mound, basically, reminds me of the way that Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stop and, take care of Boromir's body.
Absolutely.
I thought it was really touching and inspiring how Theoden says, they will ever guard the ford of the Isen or whatever. And so it's really meaningful. It's meaningful for Theoden, and it's meaningful for, I would think, all the men that they have with them to see that their countrymen have been respected and cared for in that way. And it just shows, like, again, that the kind of priority of those who are on the side of the good is always to do the thing that needs to be done and done well, not just kind of casting things aside, even though it's not tactically beneficial.
I think it's interesting that Theoden expresses worry as they are passing through and they come across the kind of like the dried out river of the River Isen. And they're like, all right, what devilry has happened here? And Gandalf doesn't exactly know. But Theoden is like, do we really need to like pass this river where so many of our kindred have fallen? It says, must we pass this way where the carrion beasts devour so many good riders of the mark? And Gandalf says, grievous is the fall of your men, but you shall see at least the wolves of the mountains do not devour them. It is with their friends, the orcs, that they hold their feast. Such indeed is the friendship of their kind.
Yeah, I underline that too. That the alliances that orcs have are always these kind of contingent things, whether it's the orcs and the Uruk-hai or orcs and wolves. It's just, it's not out of anything that's like any kind of kinship or fellowship or whatever. It's always just this, like,
there's no fidelity among these
fidelity. Yeah,
allies.
Exactly. That's perfect. Yeah.
The moment they lose their usefulness, they're turned upon and they're literally devoured by each other.
Yeah.
And that's such a theme in Lord of the Rings. It's like evil undoes itself. We just have to wait long enough, and the wolves will devour the very people that raised them.
Yeah, right. Pretty grisly. Yeah.
Getting back to where we are in the text, they say to Gandalf, like, all right, you're saying that you're not like the wizard of all wizards, but what about these trees? And Gandalf is like, the trees? Nay, I see the wood as plainly as you do, but that is no deed of mine. It is a thing beyond the counsel of the wise. Better than my design, and better even than my hope, the event has proved. So he's like, yeah, I set the pieces in place for Treebeard to like get his boys together,
Right.
but this is better than I even planned.
Yeah.
Like I didn't think the whole forest was going to march all the way to Helm's Deep and like eat all these orcs. That's great.
Yeah, it's like a whole other army showed up,
Yeah. Theoden says, "Then if not yours, whose is the wizardry? Not Sauron's, that is plain. Is there some mightier sage of whom we have yet to learn?" And Gandalf's like, "It is not wizardry, but a power far older. A power that walked the earth, ere elf sang or hammer rang." And then he gives a nice little Gandalfian poem. Do you want to read it?
Sure. Ere iron was found or tree was hewn, when young was mountain under moon, ere ring was made or wrought was woe, it walked the forests long ago. What does wrought was woe mean?
I think we could switch the word over to
Woe
or
was
woe
wrought.
was wrought. So like I think like any evil like machinations of an enemy. "And what may be the answer to your riddle?" said Theoden. And Gandalf, he says, "I shall return to Isengard, and those who will may come with me. There they may see strange things." So at this point, no one but Gandalf knows that Isengard is like likely fallen. I don't think that even Gandalf knows like 100% sure, but the presence of the Ents and the Huorns here, just to clarify, because I think we've said Huorns a couple times. So as I understand it, you have the Ents who are the herders of the trees.
Uh-huh.
And then you have the Huorns who are not Ents. I get the sense that they, at one point in time, were Ents, but they've become more tree-ish.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Mm-hmm.
And the herders of the trees are basically able to command them. So they're not quite Ents, but they are able to move like Ents. And there's kind of this like ethereal quality to them. Like it talks about like, like a black mist that like moves over the ground. And wherever that black mist settles, suddenly there are trees present there. And in the chapter previous to Helm's Deep, Legolas uses his elf sight and Gandalf's like, "What do you see?" And he's like, "Well, I see like this like black mist moving."
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what it is. Is it good? Is it evil? And it's kind of like, yeah, it's not good or evil. It's just a very powerful old force that kind of exists outside of those constructs of like good and bad. It's not magic, but it's definitely magic, if you get my meaning. But he tells Theoden like, that he's going to go to Isengard, and Theoden's like, "Look, bro, I'm old. like, like my age is not just something that Wormtongue like convinced me of.
I actually am old.
Like that took a lot out of me. All right. And he's like, and we need to like bury our dead. We can't just like leave this battlefield. We have to like take care of a few things. I don't have time to get an army together." And Gandalf's like, "All right, we're going to a parlay, not a fight."
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, don't feel like you have to get a whole force together, because like we're not going to be marching on Isengard. And they get together a small group and they leave as quickly as they can. But before they leave, they do take time to sleep. They take time to rest. And they take time to show mercy to the men who had joined with the orcs in battle, the men of Dunland. And they take time to bury the people who were closest to Theoden before they leave.
Yeah, Erkenbrand gets some lines here where he's the one who, goes to these men of Dunland and says, you can sort of pay recompense by repairing the evil in which you have joined.
Yeah.
And he says, afterwards you'll take an oath not to pass the fords of Isen. And then he says, you can go free back to your land, for you've been deluded by Saruman.
Yeah.
Many of you have got death as the reward for your trust in him. But had you conquered, little better would your wages have been, which is true.
Yeah.
And they're amazed at this mercy because they've been told by Saruman that the men of Rohan are cruel and burn their captives alive.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, we find out here that Hama has a grave.
Yeah, it says, in a grave alone under the shadow of the Hornburg lay Hama, captain of the King's Guard. He fell before the gate.
But they kind of give him like a special place. He's kind of still the door warden in a way.
I love that. I was just about to say the same thing.
It's
he
really
fell before the gate.
It's really beautiful, that he was there and that's where he remains, is in that spot.
Like he guarded the door of the King's Hall in Edoras, and he guarded the door at Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
And yeah, just it's beautiful. And I'm glad that we got the time with Hama that we did, because it makes this loss feel earned. Earned is the wrong word. What's the word I'm looking for? It makes this loss feel significant. These aren't nameless people who are dying. They're people with personalities and with fidelity to their king and to their land. Like they're fighting for something that really matters. And so his death is not in vain.
Yeah, we get to know a little bit about his character, and that he's an honorable man who had his own agency and perspective on the world. And
yeah,
as we talked about, he reveals something about what it means to be in sort of an impossible position and still, strive for the best.
Yeah.
And he was still doing that when he fell.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned before, Sauron only has slaves. Theoden has subjects, but they're not slaves. They're their own people. And Hama chooses to break the rules. He uses his own mind, and he makes his own determination that a rule sometimes needed to be broken. And he goes against what Theoden says, but by going against what he says, he's actually serving Theoden best. And that's a beautiful thing. I love Hama.
His actions lead to the salvation of his people.
Yeah.
Right? Just this one choice, like, do I let these folks in the door, and do I let Gandalf carry his staff? I mean, the whole plot of Helm's Deep hinges on that choice.
It says, in the afternoon, the king's company prepared to depart. The work of burial was then but beginning, and Theoden mourned for the loss of Hama, his captain, and cast the first earth upon his grave. He says, great injury indeed has Sauron done to me in all this land, and I will remember it when we meet.
This made me think about the fact that we never get a scene of Theoden mourning Theodred.
I have the exact same note in my margin here.
He shows more emotion for Hama than he does for his son. Unless that happened off screen, you know what I mean? But I kind of don't think it did.
You get this line, great injury indeed has Sauron done to me and all this land. And what I wrote here is maybe his grief for his son is so close that he can't actually speak it out loud, but he mourns for his door warden almost in place of his son. It's like that grief that is too real, too strong for him to touch.
Yeah, I could see that.
I think that, when he's mourning for Hama, he is mourning for Theodred.
And maybe there's a way in which a king's sovereignty means that they don't get to mourn personally, at least publicly, that he has to mourn for all his people.
Yeah. And
so mourning for Hama is like licit, like it's part of the job.
Yeah. And
so he can do that publicly, but anything that he has for himself and for Theodred, he kind of has to keep, for his bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. So they make their way to this small company of riders. It says that there's an arch that the forest makes. They saw now an opening like an arched gate under mighty boughs, and through it Gandalf passed, and they followed him. And they're entering into this dangerous haunted forest, essentially. It says, there they heard the creaking and groaning of boughs and far cries, and a rumor of wordless voices murmuring angrily. No orc or other living creature could be seen. And Legolas is like, this place is great.
I'd like to hang out. Learn their language.
He's like, these are the strangest trees I ever saw. I've seen many an oak grow from acorn to ruinous age. I wish that there were leisure now to walk among them. They have voices, and in time I might come to understand their thought. That just shows Legolas's age again. We get these little glimpses of just how ancient Legolas is, where he's like, I've seen, acorns grow to oaks of ruinous age. So he's
Right.
old.
Gimli's like, no, thank you.
Yeah, he's like, no, no,
No, that's okay. Let's just keep riding, please.
But as much as Legolas loves this forest, Gimli is like, nah, dog. Like, the most impressive thing were these glittering caves that I just saw when I retreated back in Helm's Deep. He goes, I've seen a greater wonder in this land, more beautiful than any grove or glade that ever grew. My heart is still full of it. Do you know that the caverns of Helm's Deep are vast and beautiful? And then he makes it a little personal. He goes, do you think those halls are fair where your king dwells under the hill in Mirkwood, and dwarfs helped their making long ago? They are but hovels compared with the caverns I have seen here. Immeasurable halls filled with an everlasting music of water that tinkles into pools, as fair as Khalazaram in the starlight.
I really imagine Tolkien describing like a cathedral.
Yeah.
Or maybe even like, multiple cathedrals. Because he talks about columns and he talks about almost like stained glass, all the gems that are there, and he talks about the roof. He says wings, ropes, curtains fine as frozen clouds, spears, banners, pinnacles of suspended places.
Yeah.
And the way the light plays.
Off the pools. Yeah. Yeah. And Legolas is like, oh, like, would you like mine these places? Like Legolas has the idea of like he would go in and like take ore away.
Right.
Gimli's like, no. He goes, we would tend these glades of flowering stone, not quarry them. So he's like, you wouldn't cut down like this forest for firewood, would you? Like in the same way,
right? With
cautious skill, tap by tap, a small chip of rock and no more, perhaps in a whole anxious day. So we would work as the years went by. We should open up new ways and displays for chambers that are still dark, glimpsed only as a void between fissures in the rock.
I like that, Legolas, I think it just shows this friendship kind of developing where he says, you move me, Gimli. He's like, even though I don't get it, I've never heard you talk like this before. And your passion is like inviting me into like potentially experiencing this place like a dwarf would.
Yeah.
And then they make a deal, right? That if they make it back after war, then Gimli will go with Legolas to Fangorn, and Legolas will go with Gimli to these caves.
I think this type of oath is the type of thing that soldiers make with one another.
Yeah, to like have something to hang on to.
I think about the loss that Tolkien experienced personally in World War I, in the Great War, where of his 4 best friends, 2 died before they really had a chance to live.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that Tolkien did was take the poems of his friend and publish them. This is one of the very first things that he ever worked to have published, was a collection of poems.
Gosh, I didn't know that. That's really cool.
So they move along here. It says, at last the company passed through the trees and found that they had come to the bottom of the Coombe, which means valley, where the road from Helm's Deep branched, going one way east to Edoras and the other north to the fords of Isen. And this is where Legolas looks into the forest and he goes, it says that he lets out a cry. He lets out a sudden cry. There are eyes, he said, eyes looking out from the shadows of the boughs. I never saw such eyes before. The others, surprised by his cry, halted and turned, but Legolas started to ride back. And Gimli's like, no. Like, do as you please in your madness, but let me first get down from this horse. I wish to see no eyes.
He's really scared.
And it's Gandalf that calls him back. He's like, stay, Legolas Greenleaf. Has Legolas ever been called Legolas Greenleaf by anybody?
I don't think so. I think that's the first time.
It's almost like when your mom,
uses your middle name.
He's like, stay, Legolas Greenleaf. Do not go back into the wood. Not yet. Now is not your time. What did you make of that?
I mean, it's not your time to die? Is that what
I
that
think
means?
That's exactly what he's saying, yeah. Because Galadriel just sent him his, text message.
Oh, that's like, right.
Beware
the sea.
Like the cry of seagulls, because if you see the sea, you're not going to be coming back to Middle Earth. And so his own death, and he says to Gimli, like when Gimli's like, oh, she didn't send me anything. And he's like, all right, man, do you want like a message about your own death? Like, it was a major bummer.
Sorry, that really tickled me.
And Gimli's like, yeah, I would have her say that if she had not else to say, bro.
Right.
Like,
Gimli's like not even paying attention to what the like message was. He's just like, where's my poem?
where's my poem about how I'm going to die?
I love it.
Yeah, now is not your time. I thought that was interesting. But this is where, as you mentioned earlier, this is where they see the Ents. It says, as tall as trolls they were, 12 feet or more in height. Their strong bodies, stout as young trees, seemed to be clad with raiment or with hide of close-fitting gray and brown. It says that they have long limbs like the limbs of a heron that are striding through the grass. It says they came swiftly from the north, walking like wading herons in their gait, but not in their speed, for their legs and their long paces beat quicker than the heron's wings. So that kind of gets to our question about how Treebeard is able to cover so much ground. It's like his feet are moving faster than the beating of a bird's wings. That's pretty fast clip.
And they're taking huge steps too, right? I think it's interesting that we get another description of Ents here.
Yeah, I wonder if it's almost like a repetition.
Well, it's repetition, but like I feel like it's like he's describing it for the audience in the book, like in the text. Like we know what Ents look like. We had a whole chapter, a long chapter with Fangorn.
A very long chapter, yes.
And with Quickbeam, right?
Yeah.
And with all these Ents at the Entmoot.
Mm-hmm.
But these characters have never seen an Ent. Yeah. So it's like Tolkien is describing the Ents for them, or like
how describing
what they
them the first time.
Describing what they see, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just a matter of like, he wrote this chapter and then like went back and wrote the other chapter and like forgot.
Probably years later. Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it's more like connected to what's happening in the chapter. He has to describe it because our kind of point of view is from, these new characters, not from Merry and Pippin or whoever.
Yeah. It's interesting, this idea of like the sundering of myth from like the daily experience of these people. I mean, like the Rohirrim don't live that far from Fangorn Forest, like they're able to ride there on their horses. They could go explore in Fangorn Forest, but the Ents to them are a myth. And so they're shocked to see this. And Gandalf is like, these are the shepherds of the trees. Is it so long since you listened to tales by the fireside? There are children in your land who, out of the twisted threads of story, could pick the answer to your question. You have seen Ents, O king, Ents out of Fangorn Forest, which in your tongue is called the Entwood.
It's like, you think it was just called that? Like,
yeah, bro. It's like, Ents and Entwood? I wonder.
Called that for a reason, dude. And this is when Theoden says, I think you mentioned this earlier, where he says, songs we have to tell of these things, but we're forgetting them, teaching them only to children as a careless custom.
Yeah.
And now the songs have come down among us out of strange places and walk visible under the sun.
And Gandalf's like, you are not without allies, even if you know them not. Like there are forces for good moving in the world, and we can get so caught up in our own problems that we're blind to them,
Mm-hmm.
It's like you cared little for matters outside of your own land, but there are good people there who are also striving for the good.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where they come to the memorial that was made by the writers that Gandalf set to do that job.
Mm-hmm.
Had you ever heard of the word Eyot, E-Y-O-T?
No, I don't think so.
So I looked it up. It's, like if you can imagine a wide river, how sometimes there are islands between the two shores. Mm-hmm. It's long, thin islands. That's what an Eyot is. And that's where this mound is piled, ringed with stones and set with many spears. Gandalf says, here lie all the men of the mark that fell near this place. And this is where we get the description of kind of Gandalf's doings during the time that he was gone.
Yeah, all of his comings and goings and who he sent where, and
kind of the three separate tasks of send men to Helm's Deep, send men to Edoras, set men to care for the dead at the Fords of Isen. So they continue on and are getting closer and closer to Isengard, and they can kind of see smokes rising from Isengard. And also the river has basically dried up. Like the waters aren't flowing in the river.
Right.
And so they're wondering, like, what is going on? Aragorn says, "What do you think of that, Gandalf? One would say that all the Wizard's Vale was burning." And Aemir's like, there's always a fume above that valley these days. Like, the wheels of industry are constantly being driven by these fires and steams. It says, but these are steams rather than smoke. Saruman is brewing some devilry to greet us. Maybe he is boiling all the rivers of the Isen, and that is why the rivers run dry. So they don't know that the Ents have basically flooded the bowl of Isengard.
But Gandalf is like, maybe he is.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we're going to find out. He's so confident,
Hold your horses.
He's like, yeah, we'll see. Right now it's time to rest.
And here's where we get this like really creepy description of like how the forest moves. Like it's not just creepy that the trees are walking. It says the moon was gone. Stars were shining above, but over the ground there crept a darkness blacker than the night. On both sides of the river it rolled towards them, going northward. "Stay where you are," said Gandalf. "Draw no weapons. Wait, and it will pass by." And the mist gathers around them, but on either side there arose walls of impenetrable gloom. They were in a narrow lane between moving towers of shadow. Long it seemed to them that they sat and were afraid, but at last the darkness and the rumor passed and vanished between the mountain's arms.
The darkness and the rumor. I love that. Something about the voices of the trees. It's also sort of strange that they pass through the forest.
Yeah.
And then they stop, and then the forest kind of like passes through them,
Yeah.
So they're like back in this like tunnel with like trees on either side of them.
And after the trees are gone, they find that all the orcs that had died have been kind of gathered into this huge pile. And it's almost like the process of decay that happens in the forest happens like very quickly, like almost overnight.
Faster.
The Death Down, it was afterward called, and no grass would grow there. But the strange trees were never seen in Deeping Combe again. They returned at night and had gone far away to the dark dales of Fangorn. Thus they were revenged upon the orcs. The forest will win, man. The forest will, long after we're gone, the forest will grow back. And the trees will have their revenge.
We go from these descriptions of trees and mounds and rivers to suddenly descriptions of
industry,
something hard, and he's describing streets and highways and pillars and
treasuries, storehouses, armories,
stones,
smithies, great furnaces, iron wheels.
Right. Stones that are fitted together, with no seams. And it's not like he's describing modern like glass skyscrapers, but that's really what it evokes, I think.
Yeah. And the structure of Isengard itself is like a wonder of the world,
Right.
It's not an evil, terrible thing. Well, terrible in the sense that it's like awe-inspiring, but it's not an evil thing. It's sort of like part of the landscape. Saruman has taken this thing that was, made by the Númenóreans from the sea, the builders of old, who smoothed the ring of Isengard, and yet seemed a thing not made by the craft of men, but riven from the bones of the earth and the ancient torment of the hills. He takes that thing, this awe-inspiring thing where men, would observe the stars and, be part of the natural world. And he turns it into this like, industrial hellscape. And I think that, we started the podcast with the description of Isengard and how Saruman was really just making a copy of Mordor, of Barad-dûr. That it was almost like a child's play thing compared to the actual tower. So it's like, it's the two towers. Like you have Barad-dûr and you have the Tower of Isengard, but really there's only one tower.
Yeah.
And that's the Fortress of Barad-dûr.
I have a question about Isengard in general. And this is maybe this is only interesting to me, but obviously Isengard is in the condition now where Saruman has been kind of bent to the will of Mordor, whether he knows it or not.
Right.
But certainly there were thousands of years where he was there,
Yeah.
and he's in the tower, but there's this mile diameter circumference. It's this ring of walls.
Yeah.
So are those walls like intended to be manned by human beings? And
I don't know.
Does he have like a big staff? Because it also says there are houses,
Yeah.
chambers, halls, passages cut and nestled back into the walls and upon their inner side. So like it almost sounds like there's like a city here. And then there's on the outside of the walls, it says that there's fields that haven't been tended.
Yeah.
Right, like fields for growing crops.
It's like a campus. Yeah. I think the implication is that there would have been many people working there.
So it's not just Saruman hanging out by himself.
No.
Right? It's a whole like city almost, or at least a town that's there.
Do you remember, I believe it's in the Council of Elrond when Gandalf is recounting like his encounter with Saruman, how he passed through the gates and saw that they were manned and
yes,
locked, and then like he was let in, but when the doors or the gates closed behind him, he was like, ooh, like
something's wrong.
Something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Like it's not intended to be a fortress. It's not supposed to be. I think he's seeing the beginnings of, okay, now it's going to be populated by orcs and by evil men who are, running this machinery day and night.
Right.
So now we arrive to the moment we've all been waiting for. The company pulls up and they see two small figures lying at their ease, gray clad, hardly to be seen among the stones. There were bottles and bowls and platters laid beside them, as if they had just eaten well and now rested from their labor. One seemed to sleep, the other with crossed legs and arms behind his head, leaned back against the broken rock and sent from his mouth long wisps of little rings of thin blue smoke.
I just had a huge smile on my face reading about Merry and Pippin.
Yeah. Welcome, my lords, to Isengard. We are the door wardens.
We get their full names here, which I so great. Meriadoc, son of Saradoc, is my name, and my companion, who, alas, is overcome with weariness.
And then he kicks him with his foot.
Kicks him with his foot. Is Peregrine, son of Paladin, of the house of Took. Far in the north is our home. Oh, it's so good.
The Lord Sauron is within, but at this moment he is closeted with one worm tongue, or doubtless he would be here to welcome such honorable guests.
Yeah, and Gandalf just laughs.
Gimli's response is one of my favorite. As much like trash as I talked about this text, I quote this quite a bit. He calls them woolly-footed and wool-painted truants.
I love it.
He's like, hey, you got furry feet, your hair is curly, and you're truant. We've been chasing after you, you rascals.
200 leagues through fen and forest, battle and death to rescue you. And here we find you feasting and idling and smoking. Where did you come by the weed, you villains?
Hammer and tongs. I'm so torn between rage and joy that if I do not burst, it will be a marvel.
So good.
And Theoden, again, is like, so these are the lost ones of your company, Gandalf? The days are fated to be filled with marvels. Already I have seen many since I left my house, and now here before my eyes stand yet another of the folk of legend. Are not these the halflings that some among us call the Hobliden?
I like that finally they come across some people who like know about the hobbits.
The hobbits are like, oh, wait, we're on your lists?
Yeah, like, Rohan has like kept these stories somehow. Theoden's kind of excited to see him.
They're absolutely tickled by this. Mary especially is just really taken with Theoden and starts talking about, Theoden says, I hadn't heard they spouted smoke from their mouths.
Yeah, let me tell you about the Longbottom in the south, Longbottom leaf in the south farthing, and then Gandalf is like, "You don't know your danger, Theoden. These guys are going to go on and on about everything they know about pipeweed, and we'll be here for 2 hours, listening to them talk about who grandfathered who and who passed down whatever to whomever and all that."
I have heard my wife use the exact same tone of voice when someone starts talking to me about Lord of the Rings.
She's like, "Don't get him started."
Like, hey, like you think you want to know what he thinks about Lord of the Rings, but there is not enough time in the day.
Yeah.
All right, so like don't even get him started, because these hobbits will sit on the edge of ruin and discuss the pleasures of the table or the small doings of their fathers, grandfathers, and great grandfathers, and remoter cousins to the 9th degree, if you encourage them with undue patience. Theoden is like, well, you know what? I want to know more about this, so we'll check back in later.
Yeah, right.
And this is like the moment, I think, when Merry is like kind of taken with Theoden. This is when he begins to kind of become wed to him and his service. This is when he begins to become a writer of Rohan himself. Farewell, my hobbits. May we meet again in my house. There you shall sit beside me and tell me all that your hearts desire, the deeds of your grandsires as far back as you can reckon them. And we will speak also of Tobold the Old and his herb lore. Farewell. The hobbits bow low. So that's the King of Rohan, says Pippin. A fine old fellow, very polite.
That's so good.
So that's the end of the chapter. As much trash as we talked about it, I still enjoyed reading it. And you know what? We probably needed a little breather after Helm's Deep to kind of catch our breath and let our heartbeat steady again.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's, Tolkien's intention with the chapter. Wrap up some loose ends, There's been this huge war, and aren't people going to wonder like what happened to all the bodies? And what about
they probably
this?
won't, and they probably didn't, but we're going to get it anyway.
But I do think, like, what about this forest, right? That piece is really, you really want to know more about that. And it's cool that he gave us more. It's not just like tossed off as something that doesn't matter. It's this mystical, magical thing. And we get to kind of live there a little bit more, which is cool.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for reading along with us this week. Next week, we'll pick up with Book 3, Chapter 9, Flotsam and Jetsam. If you enjoy the podcast, we ask that you share it with a Lord of the Rings friend in your life. Subscribe on all the places that you listen to your podcasts, and be sure and leave us a review. It helps other people find the podcast.
We'll see you next week, you woolly-footed truants.
Bye-bye.
Bye.